if the only way we can feel good about ourselves is if we have all the knowledge and all of the answers and we are the most experienced person in the room, and that's the only way that we know how to feel good and strong in the room, we are not building confidence. We are perpetuating a lack of confidence because confidence doesn't need to lean on being the number one person at everything in the room in order to feel good about itself. A confident person can be an underdog in a situation and still have self-respect and still show up strong.
Welcome to The Art of Speaking Up, a podcast that helps professional women access the limitless potential that lies within them. I'm your host, Jessica Guzik, and my mission is to help you find that spark inside you that has the power to transform your career in ways you may not have thought possible. I'm so excited that you're here. And now, on to the show.
Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am so excited for today's episode. I have my outline in front of me and I am ready to go. I have so much to cover. Today, I am diving into the question of why do smarter, more eloquent, more confident, more articulate people make you feel bad about yourself? This is something that I see come up so often. Sometimes you feel pretty good about yourself and you feel pretty confident and capable until you find yourself in a room with people who are more confident and capable than you are. A lot of times there are specific people that cause you to feel this way. Maybe you perceive your boss as being very smart and eloquent, or maybe there are leaders in your company who you consider to be really experienced and really amazing at what they do and really smart in the way that they express their ideas and communicate. And anytime you're in the room with these specific people, all of a sudden your confidence shrinks and you don't feel as good about yourself and you're not able to bring the best of you into that room because of how those really smart, capable people make you feel. That is what I'm diving into in today's episode, and I'm going to be illuminating why this happens and, more importantly, why we can get so stuck in this experience, and of course, how to get unstuck and how to get out of this experience. But it's very important to understand why we get stuck in it. If we can understand why we're getting stuck in a pattern, that's what gives us the power to finally break out of the pattern. Often when we're stuck in a cycle and we can't achieve the change or the breakthrough we want, a big root cause is because we don't understand what's keeping us stuck. We don't understand what's keeping us in that cycle that we're trying to break out of. So in today's episode, I'm going to talk about what I see keeping people stuck in this cycle so that you have a deeper understanding of what is going on. Because with the situation of you being in a room with people who seem smarter or more capable than you or have many more years of experience than you, we often misdiagnose why that is happening, and we get stuck in this hamster wheel type of pattern of trying to get smarter and better so we can feel stronger in the room, but we never quite experience the shift in our confidence that we're hoping for. Today's episode is all about that dynamic, why that happens, and how to get out of that pattern. And the truth is, it's very important to learn to feel confident and to feel strong about yourself when you aren't the most senior person in the room or the most knowledgeable person in the room. Because the way that you get ahead in your career is by making a powerful impression on the people above you in your company. The people above you in your company have the most power to help you grow and to help you elevate within the organization. They are the ones who are making the decisions about hiring and promotion and who goes where within a company. So if we want to impress those people and we want those people to see us as very capable so that they will support our growth and further our career path within the company, we need face time with them. We need to be in rooms with them so that we can use that face time to impress them. So if we're only ever in rooms where we are the most senior person in the room, that is not good for our career progression. which means we need to learn to feel confident, even when we aren't the most senior person in the room, even when the people in the room are smarter or more experienced than us, because we need to be able to impress them. We need to be able to feel strong and be impressive, even when we're not the top dog in the room. That's how we get ahead. That's why this is so important. Before I go deeper into the episode, I have a time-sensitive and super exciting announcement. And that announcement is that enrollment for my signature program, the Art of Speaking Up Academy, is going to be opening on Monday, March 10th. That is roughly 2 weeks from when this episode is dropping. And if it's your first time hearing about the Art of Speaking Up Academy, this is my signature program where I help you build lasting confidence. I help you strengthen your executive presence, and I help you elevate your communication skills to a leadership level. The reason that I work with you on these things is because that confidence and that executive presence is what is going to help you get recognized at your company and really help you grow your impact as a leader. Now, the Art of Speaking Up Academy is a little bit different than many professional development programs because in the way that I work with you, I go beyond the surface and I like to focus on the inner work of building confidence. So many programs keep their teachings at a surface level and they teach you these more tactical skills like speaking frameworks and how to adjust your body language. But what I have found after 5 years of coaching and supporting women in developing a powerful voice is that communication is an inside job as much as it is an outside job. You have to feel confident on the inside in order to maximize the impact that you're able to have when you communicate. This is why in the Art of Speaking Up Academy, I spend equal time supporting you on the inner work of building confidence as I do supporting you with the very practical tools of how to effectively share your ideas with leaders and executives. This will ensure that not only do you have the inner confidence to speak up and hold your own in the room, even when you're under pressure, even when you're surrounded by higher up leaders, but also that you have the skills to communicate with polish, to influence others, and to really show people the extent of your leadership capabilities. This program is for you if you are ambitious, if you want to accomplish big things as a leader, and if you know that you have deeper capabilities in you that you want to uncover and tap into so that you can bring the full extent of your voice and your talents and your leadership into the workplace. This is a small, intimate group program, so you get a lot of guidance and attention from me personally so that I can help you move past some of the internal obstacles that are preventing you from feeling confident and having that confident voice. Enrollment opens Monday, March 10th. To make sure that you don't miss it, head over to jessguzikcoaching.com/academy and add yourself to the list to be notified as soon as doors open. I will drop that link in the show notes, and I will also share 2 other things in the show notes. One is the program curriculum, so you can browse through everything that you're going to learn inside of the program. And I'm also going to put my email in the show notes. If you have questions and you're trying to figure out if this is the right program for you, you can send me an email and I will circle back with you. So everything you need to know about next steps is in the show notes. And with that, I want to dive deeper into today's topic, which is intimately related to what I do in the Art of Speaking Up Academy, which is to help you feel strong and confident even when you're in a room with people who intimidate you. And this can look a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's whenever your boss is in the room, you feel more anxious and you don't feel as good about yourself because they say things in such a crisp way and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, I could never say it that way. I'm never going to look that smart and that polished. Or maybe you're in a meeting room and you do say something, you express your idea, and then someone else says the same idea, but they say it much more crisply, with much more polish. They sound much more confident, and you find yourself feeling really bad about yourself and your capabilities. If these are experiences you relate to, you are definitely not alone. This is something that I see a lot when I am supporting my clients, and it's also something that I experienced when I was in my corporate career. I remember looking around at my coworkers, looking around at the higher up leaders, and thinking about how smart and calm and self-assured they were, and then looking at myself and how much I was struggling at the time. Because if you're newer here, you might not know this about me, but I had massive struggles with confidence in my 9-to-5 career, and I overcame those struggles. But before I overcame them, I was struggling. And this was one of the really big struggles. I would be in rooms with people who I perceived to be smarter, and I would feel horrible about myself. And often I would mentally shut down because the feelings of horribleness that I felt about myself were so overwhelming that it was hard for me to be present, hard for me to be in the conversation. Now, as hard as this experience was, I was able to grow out of it. And actually, I was able to get to a point where not only did I not feel intimidated when I was in the room with leaders, but I actually truly began to enjoy getting to be in conversations with really high up executives because I had shed a lot of the insecurities and a lot of the self-consciousness, and I could actually enjoy what is so fun about those situations, which is like you get to have really high level discussions about important things that you are working on. But it took me some growth and some inner work to get there. And that is what I'm going to talk about in today's episode. I want to start by uncovering something you might not have thought about, but is very important with this topic, which is why people tend to get very stuck in this pattern. Because a lot of times, it's not just that you struggle to feel confident when you're in rooms with certain people. It's that it feels like a very stubborn stuckness that despite you working on it, you are unable to make progress in feeling the way that you want to feel in those rooms. So the reason I see people getting stuck in this so deeply is because they often incorrectly diagnose what is happening. And when we incorrectly diagnose what is happening and our understanding of the problem that we are trying to work through isn't correct, we then often tend to implement solutions that don't fit with the problem. And so those solutions don't get us where we want to go. We don't make progress. And we don't realize that the reason that we're not making progress is because we misdiagnosed the problem and therefore are applying the wrong solution. We think that we have diagnosed the problem correctly and that we have applied the correct solution. However, because there's something inherently wrong with us and we are permanently stuck, or maybe we are broken in some way, it just isn't working. And if you've ever had that thought, maybe I'm stuck, maybe I'm broken, maybe I just can't figure this out, I hope that this episode will reassure you that this isn't a situation where something is wrong with you and you're just so awkward and so lacking in confidence that you can't figure this out. It's typically because you are doing what most people do in this situation, which is this. They have the experience of being in a room with more senior, smarter, more experienced people who intimidate them, and they think to themselves, wow, my boss or this person is so smart and so experienced and so eloquent. I am less smart, I am less experienced, and I am less eloquent, and when I'm in the room with them, I feel bad. And I feel bad about myself. And the reason that I feel bad is because of the gap in their smarts and their charisma and my smarts and my charisma, because they are so much better than me, more experienced, smarter, more polished. Because that gap is so big, that's why I don't feel good about myself when I'm in the room with them. And so then we think, if I can just close that gap, if I can be smarter, if I can say my idea in a really snippy way, if I can talk the way they talk, where it's just so smooth and so articulate and they just have a way about them, if I can be really prepared and have the answer ready and be so quick and so sharp, then I will stop feeling this way. So what we are assuming in this situation is that the reason that we feel bad is because of the gap in experience and competence between us and the other people. And we assume then that the solution to us feeling better is to close that gap. for us to learn more, prepare more, become more competent, become more effective at speaking in the way that they speak, and then we will feel better. And this really feels and sounds true. Even as I'm saying this, you might be thinking to yourself, yeah, that is what's happening. What else could it possibly be? But I want to give you a different perspective in today's episode that I think is going to free you to feel less self-conscious about yourself, and that is also going to change your ability to create success in your career. And in order for me to explain to you what is really going on in these rooms and what the actual problem is, and therefore what the actual solution is, we are going to use an analogy. So we're going to bring back my good friend, Amy, and her good friend, Brenda. So here's what I want you to imagine for this situation. I want you to imagine that Amy and Brenda are young interns hoping to one day work at NASA and do engineering to help people go to space. Let's assume that that's their passion. They're both very early on in their careers, very young. They don't have a ton of experience, but they both really want to become experts in this field and build a career in this field. Now, I want you to imagine that NASA decides that they want to uplift ambitious female up-and-coming professionals who are interested in doing big things in this field. So they hold an event where they invite interns to come to NASA and meet some of the top scientists and top engineers at NASA. And Amy and Brenda both get invited to come and interact with these really smart scientists and leaders. Now, remember, Amy and Brenda aspire to be leaders in this field, but they are at the beginning of their careers, so they're highly inexperienced. So they go to this event where they're going to be talking with and socializing with these big leaders in the space. And Brenda has an amazing time. She is so excited to talk to all of these scientists. She's asking them questions. She's learning about what they're passionate about. She loves getting to know them. She loves this opportunity to be in the room with them. She's glowing with enthusiasm, and she leaves buzzing with excitement at the thought of her future and at all of the joy that she feels from the conversations that she had and at all of the growth and evolution that she's imagining for herself after having these series of conversations. So Brenda leaves this event feeling amazing. Amy, on the other hand, leaves this event feeling horrible about herself. As soon as Amy walks into the room, she sees all these leaders and she thinks to herself, oh my gosh, they're so much smarter than me. They're so much more experienced than me. They know a ton about space science. I know almost nothing. I am so inferior compared to them. And as she's walking around and socializing, that's all she can think about. All she can think about is how inferior she is, how stupid she's going to look, how experienced and smart they are compared to her. And as a result, she doesn't enjoy the conversations. She feels bad about herself during the conversations. She feels stressed and anxious and worried, and she leaves this event feeling terrible about herself. Now, this is an example where we can clearly see that the two people in this example, Amy and Brenda, are both inexperienced, and they're both in a room with people who are highly experienced. So they are both experiencing what I call a competence gap, where their competence is much lower than the competence of the other people in the room. And yet, it's not so hard or unrealistic for us to imagine that maybe one of them could enjoy this event despite there being a gap in that person's competence. So Brenda's competence is much lower than all of these leaders and scientists, but she still enjoyed the event, whereas Amy had a horrible time and felt worried and stressed and bad about herself. And we can see in an example like this, which although this is a made-up example, it's not unrealistic. It's not a departure from reality or what could happen in the real world. It's just made up for teaching purposes. But we can see in this example that it's possible to be around people who are more competent and to be experiencing the quote-unquote competence gap, but not feel bad about yourself. This example shows us that just because there are people in the room who are smarter and more competent, that doesn't necessitate you feeling bad about yourself. And this is really important Because a lot of times when you are struggling to feel good about yourself in rooms with highly experienced, highly smart, highly articulate people, it's very easy for you to think, I feel bad because of the competence gap. And therefore, the solution is to close the competence gap. But remember, from this analogy, we can see it's not the competence gap that makes us feel bad. If a gap in competence is what makes us feel bad, then both Amy and Brenda should have felt bad at this event. And to take it even farther, if it's a competence gap that makes us feel bad about ourselves, then anyone who is ever in a room with other people and experiencing a competence gap should feel bad about themselves. And we know that that isn't true. So what this brings us to is that it's not the competence gap itself that is creating the negative feelings that we have about ourselves. This is very important because we need to know what's creating the feeling if we want to work through it and evolve past it. And so at this point, I hope you're with me on the conclusion that it's not just the competence gap. There's something else at play here. So what else is at play? What is causing Amy to feel horrible about herself and Brenda to have an amazing time and leave buzzing with excitement? And that brings me to the second piece that I want to cover, which is the real reason why you might feel bad about yourself. When you feel bad about yourself in a room full of smarter, more experienced people, it is not their experience and smarts that is making you feel bad. It is not the competence gap. What is making you feel bad in that room are your thoughts about you and your feelings about you, and how those thoughts and feelings that you have about you are causing you to interpret the competence gap. This is very, very important. It's not the fact that the people around you are more competent. It's the fact that you have certain pre-existing thoughts and feelings about yourself that the competence gap is eliciting. And the best way to go deeper in this is to continue to use the Brenda and Amy example. So Brenda and Amy most likely have different thoughts about themselves. And for teaching purposes, I'm going to share with you what some of those thoughts might be. So in this example, Brenda probably has thoughts about herself such as, I have so much potential. I can't wait to evolve in this career. There's so much that I'm going to learn and discover as I become a space scientist. I am capable of becoming a space scientist and bringing my dreams to life. Those are probably the thoughts that are in Brenda's mind as she is headed over to this event. Whereas when Amy comes to this event, the thoughts that she is having are, oh my gosh, I don't have any experience in this field. I don't know what I'm talking about. I should have read up on things more before this event. I always underprepare. I don't have the same knowledge level as some of the other interns here. I'm missing information. What if I'm not really good at this? What if I can't make my dreams come to life? So Amy and Brenda come into the event with different thoughts and feelings about them. Brenda's thoughts are all about her potential and her capability, and Amy's thoughts are all about her lack of potential and where she's falling short. And then both Amy and Brenda come into an environment where there are people in the environment who are smarter and more competent, and they have radically different experiences. Brenda has this experience of, oh, look at all these experienced scientists around me. And her thought is, great, I get to talk to them. I get to learn from them. This is so exciting. Now, one of the reasons that she's thinking this is so exciting, I get to talk to them, this is awesome, is because she went into the event also thinking I am capable and one day this is going to be me. Whereas Amy walked into the event thinking I'm not capable, I didn't get it right, I never get it right. And then she sees all of these people who are more experienced than her, and her thought in response to that is, see, I'm not capable. See, they know so much more than me. See, they're so experienced. Look at how inadequate I am. And the thoughts that Amy is having, they're so smart. They're so experienced. And the fact that those thoughts feel bad isn't coming because of how smart and capable they are. Those thoughts are happening because of how smart and capable Amy does not think she is. So all of the bad feelings that Amy is having as a result of this quote unquote competence gap actually, in some ways, have very little to do with the competence gap and are mainly just the pre-existing feelings that she already had. The competence gap is just a mirror or a trigger that is bringing those thoughts to life. And this is so important for you to understand in your own growth and development, because when we're in a room with people who are smarter than us and we feel bad about it, we get so fixated on them. They're so smart. They're so eloquent. And we think that all the thoughts that we're having are about them and because of them. Those thoughts, like when we have thoughts about someone else that makes us feel bad, the thoughts that we're having about them aren't about them. They're about us. What we're really thinking about is us. Because when we come into contact with how skilled and how competent those people are, what we then have to do is we have to interpret, what does that mean for me? So Brenda interprets it as, that means that I get to have a great time talking with these scientists and learning. And Amy interprets the other people being super smart and super experienced as, oh, I'm inadequate and I will never be at their level. And it's the interpretation that we are making that is the thing that is making us feel bad. And that interpretation comes based on the relationship that we have with ourselves. When we have a strong, loving, admiring relationship with ourselves, we can tolerate being in the presence of other people who are more competent than us because it's not a threat to our own value as a human. But when we are hard on ourselves and we don't have a lot of respect for ourselves and we don't like ourselves, and then all of a sudden we're in a situation with people who are quote unquote better than us, their betterness is experienced as a threat to our own sense of goodness and belonging in the room because it is reminding us of what we're missing. And all of the things that we see in them that we fixate on, their smarts, their eloquence, they're so articulate, all of those thoughts are not thoughts about them. Those are thoughts about us and the way in which we perceive ourselves to be inferior and to be missing things. And this is so important because you can see that if we don't understand why this is happening, and we think that the reason that we feel bad is just because they know more than us and they're smarter than us, then we are going to go on a wild goose chase of trying to sound fancy and become smarter and elevate our status in the room through these external accolades and over-preparing and all of these things that aren't actually going to help us feel stronger and more solid in the room. It's similar to Amy saying to herself, I felt so insecure at that event. For the next event, I'm going to study for 2 weeks leading up to the event. I'm going to get all of these books on space science and I'm going to read all of them. And then when I go to the event, I'm not going to feel so insecure. I'm going to feel confident. Now, what do you think is going to happen if Amy spends 2 weeks reading tons of books on space science and goes to another event like this? Do you think she's going to walk into the room feeling confident and not having these feelings? For me, after working with so many women and helping them finally break through and build real, lasting confidence, I can tell you that in my experience, the answer is no. Amy is not going to feel confident walking into that room because the problem wasn't that she lacks the competence. The problem wasn't the competence gap. The problem was Amy's relationship to herself and the thoughts that she has about herself. And all of the thoughts that she is having about the other people are really just thoughts about herself and her own inadequacy that were there before she even walked into the room with the other people. Those thoughts were there just waiting for a circumstance to come along and poke and prod and trigger them to come out and start making Amy feel bad about herself. This is why when we try to over-prepare, when we try to accumulate accolades, when we try to elevate our outward status in the room without doing the inner work of changing our relationship with ourselves and changing the thoughts and feelings that we have about ourselves, we will fail to experience meaningful progression in our confidence because we aren't addressing the root cause of the problem. The lack of competence was never the reason that we were not feeling good in the room. It was a trigger, like it played a role. But if you trace back to the root cause that's causing all of this, it's the relationship that we have with ourselves and the thoughts and feelings that we have about ourselves. And if we try to just solve for the competence piece, and if we just try to say, okay, I feel bad because I'm incompetent, so let me build the competence and then I won't feel bad, it's going to backfire because we haven't addressed the root cause. We don't actually feel confident in who we are. And one thing that I want to share with you about confidence is confidence means being able to be in a room with people who are more experienced and are better than you and still feel good about yourself. And if the only way we can feel good about ourselves is if we have all the knowledge and all of the answers and we are the most experienced person in the room, and that's the only way that we know how to feel good and strong in the room, we are not building confidence. We are perpetuating a lack of confidence because confidence doesn't need to lean on being the number one person at everything in the room in order to feel good about itself. A confident person can be an underdog in a situation and still have self-respect and still show up strong. That is far more valuable. The ability to show up strong and feel good about yourself when you are an actual underdog in the room is one of the signatures of real, lasting, authentic confidence. So ironically, when we try to feel better by closing this competence gap so that we don't feel so bad in the room, not only are we not solving the problem at the right level because we've misdiagnosed the problem like I talked about before, but even more than that, we are depriving ourselves of the opportunity to build real confidence by learning to feel solid and stable in our own skin when we are the underdog in the room. And most people, when they have these underdog situations and they feel insecure and they lack confidence, they think to themselves, okay, let me gain the knowledge. Let me gather the competence. They don't think to themselves, let me remain an underdog and learn to feel confident as an underdog. But that is the exact solution. We have to stop trying to close the competence gap, and we have to learn to be like Brenda. We have to learn to be the intern who goes into the event without as much experience, without as much knowledge, and isn't afraid to shake everyone's hand and have a conversation and hold herself with confidence. That is the true definition of real, lasting confidence, and it doesn't come from us having to be the number one in the room. No amount of accolades or accomplishments or knowledge will ever be able to compensate for a lack of us feeling solid about ourselves internally. And also, what's really important to know is that if you want to have a big career where you're moving up as an executive, you will continue to be experiencing underdog situations. Even at the C-suite, you are an underdog to the CEO. Even as a CEO, you are an underdog to the board of directors. Or if you're the CEO, you have to go up in front of investors, right, who have power over you in certain ways. So leadership actually requires us to be able to tolerate the experience of being the underdog. Leadership doesn't mean we're immune to being the underdog and we're always the number one in the room. It means that we are someone in the organization who can go into underdog situations and show up strong and perform really well in those situations, even though we are the underdog. So instead of you trying to be more competent or sound smarter or talk like your boss or be more like the other people around you, I would encourage the opposite. Stop trying to be like them and try to be more of you, and try to be able to tolerate being more of you when you are in the room with them. What that means is you can tolerate the experience of being imperfect. You can tolerate the experience of missing information. You can tolerate the experience of having fewer years working at the company than they do. You can tolerate the experience of not being able to be as sharp as they are in the conversation because you have less experience than them. You can tolerate all of those things. And despite those things, you can still like yourself. You can still respect yourself. You can still treat yourself with kindness. You can still think empowering thoughts to yourself. You can still encourage yourself. That is the goal. The goal isn't to magically always have the competence. That is something that is impossible to achieve in every single room you're in. The goal is to be able to be incompetent, to be the underdog, and to not immediately fall into these patterns of self-criticism or shutting down or ruminating or getting stuck in your head or being really mean to yourself. And a lot of it really comes down to what is the level of trust and respect that I am able to build with myself? Am I able to build a respect for myself that is so solid and so strong that even in a highly vulnerable situation where I am quote unquote worse than everyone else in terms of knowledge, capability, and experience, my self-respect will not break. I will not start mistreating myself. I will not start thinking really awful thoughts about myself. Even in a situation that challenges me in that really deep way, my self-trust and my self-respect will stay intact. And that is what will help me impress them in that situation. When you're in a situation with your boss and leaders, it's not going to be you trying to be and sound perfect or prep for 10 hours that is going to impress them. What is going to impress them is the energy and the maturity that they will experience from you when you are able to maintain a sense of self-respect when you're in the room with them and when you're unafraid to engage in the conversation with them, even though you are imperfect. People can feel that self-assuredness. They can feel when you are comfortable in that situation, and that makes them feel more comfortable around you and more trusting in you. So other people's competence has almost nothing to do with how confident you can feel in the room. The variable that is going to dictate how confident you feel in the room is your relationship with yourself and how strong that relationship can be. And this is why when I'm working with my clients, this is the first thing that I work on before I get into anything around how to sound smart, how to impress executives, how to sound really sharp and powerful, which those are all things I teach and all things that I help my clients with. But before I get to any of that, the main thing we focus on is our relationship with ourselves and how we treat ourselves and how we feel about ourselves. Because if we don't learn to treat ourselves better in difficult situations, and if we don't grow the muscle of feeling strong about ourselves in difficult, vulnerable situations, it won't matter how many frameworks we learn or how many tools we have in our tool belt. The feelings of inadequacy are going to overwhelm us, and they're going to prevent us from making a strong impression in the room. When we can learn to feel confident internally, then we can actually use the tools that we have because we are bold enough to take up space and be a voice in that conversation, even as an underdog. And by the way, this creates so much freedom when you no longer need to be the most experienced or smartest or most tenured person in the room in order to make a strong impression. When you stop using those as the barometer for how you feel and how good you feel about yourself, then all of a sudden you get to go into rooms, focus on what actually matters, which is being a leader and making an impact. So to wrap this up in a brief summary, when we're in the room with someone and we feel bad about ourselves because they're so smart and so experienced, and that makes us feel bad about ourselves, it is so important to recognize that their smarts, their charisma, their experience is not the true reason we feel bad. The reason we feel bad is because of the relationship that we have with ourselves walking into that room and the thoughts and feelings that we have about ourselves walking into that room. And if we want to feel confident walking into that room, it's not about us becoming competent and closing the competence gap. It's about us changing those thoughts and feelings that we have about ourselves before we walk into the room so that that competence gap isn't so triggering for us. It doesn't activate our fears and worries and insecurities in such a big way. This is what I mean when I talk about the inner work of working on your voice. No amount of outside frameworks will help you with the internal confidence that you need to build in order to walk into a room and feel really solid about yourself, even as the underdog. This is why when I support my clients in the Art of Speaking Up Academy, I spend roughly 2 months just working with them on confidence and just working with them on strengthening their relationships with themselves before I even teach any sort of executive communication framework or any sort of tool to help them sound crisp when they speak. And I do that very intentionally because so many people come into the Art of Speaking Up Academy thinking that that's what they need to learn and thinking the solution is to learn to sound crisp. And if I dove into that program and said, okay, here are the 5 frameworks you need, and then you will sound amazing every time you speak, and you will feel great when you're in the room with all of these executives, I would be setting up my clients to fail because I would be reinforcing this idea that the reason that they're struggling is because of this competence gap. And the real truth is, so often, the reason that we are struggling is because of our internal psychological landscape and the way that we feel about ourselves. And it's normal to struggle with this. I had super intense struggles with this when I was in my corporate career. The good news is we can change this. We can learn to feel differently about ourselves. And that enables us to walk into the room feeling solid, even when people in the room are more experienced than us. And it allows us to be more like Brenda, who can feel confident and hold her own and make a strong impression, even as the underdog. If you are wanting to feel more confident in the room, no matter the situation, even when your boss is in the room, even when there are people in the room who know more than you and who have more years of experience than you, and if you want to do the inner work, to have the psychological strength to be able to feel strong inside, even as the underdog, I want to invite you to come work with me in the Art of Speaking Up Academy. I'm going to help you build the inner confidence to feel solid about what you bring to the table, even when you're not the most experienced person in the room. And I'm going to teach you tools on how to sound crisp and how to really impress people, but you're going to have the inner confidence to back up those tools. So you're not just going to learn tools that help you at a surface level. You're going to do inner transformational work to feel more solid. And then on top of that, you're also going to learn tools to help you sound more crisp and persuasive and compelling when you speak. If that is a transformation that you are ready for, I want to invite you to come join me in the next cohort. And as a reminder, enrollment is going to open Monday, March 10th. In the show notes, I'm going to share a link where you can add yourself to the list to be notified as soon as enrollment opens so that you don't miss it. And I'm also going to add a link to the program curriculum where you can see exactly what you're going to learn in the Art of Speaking Up Academy. And I will put my email in the show notes so you can reach out to me if you have a question about the program. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. This was so much fun to record. I hope you love it, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.